Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today is Friday, October 1st at 10 a.m. This is the Select Board meeting. It is not a regular meeting. This is a meeting we've added to address a couple of agenda items. And I want to start by mentioning that this is a remote meeting. It's being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, called an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed by Governor Baker on June 16th. The meeting is being taped by Milton Access Television and Broadcast, and the meeting is also being taped by Cindy Christensen. I'd like to introduce the members of the board. My name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair. With us this morning, maybe we could go around the Zoom room and introduce ourselves.
Arthur Doyle, Vice Chair.
Mike Zulis, Secretary.
Melinda Collins, member.
Okay, our fifth member is Richard Wells, who is not available this morning. We're also joined by Michael Dennehy, our town administrator, and by Sue Bridges. Welcome to Sue, who is our new licensing and contract agent in the Select Board's office, and she is pinch hitting this morning with us and helping us out while we have a vacancy in the executive administrative assistant position. So welcome to Sue, and thank you for joining us this morning, Sue. The first couple of items on our agenda relate to airplane noise, and we're also joined by Tom Doherty, who's our Massport Community Advisory Committee representative. So again, thank you everyone for your availability this morning. Item 2 on our agenda is a discussion and approval, we hope, of a comment letter to the FAA and Massport regarding the MIT study on runway for our alternative flight paths. So why don't I open it up to Mr. Zulis, who represented us at the MCAC meeting and offered some comments, and also to Mr. Doherty if they'd like to make any comments. Everyone should have a draft of a letter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last Thursday, the MIT study group presented their Block 2 recommendations. That included the recommendations for runways 4R and 22 and others as well. At the direction of this board, I made a statement. The elected officials were given the opportunity to make a statement at the beginning of the meeting, and then the Massport Massport is accepting comments on behalf of the MIT study group on the Block 2 recommendations through Monday. The comments are due by Monday the 4th. And we thought, in addition to what we have presented earlier and the statement, the oral statement that I made last Thursday, we thought it made sense to present comments and to focus on a couple of things. One, to focus on the fact that we've been asking for a comparison for several months. We've been asking the MIT group to do a comparison of the pre-RNEV noise population exposure to both the current noise population exposure and the potential alternatives, the noise population exposure for the potential alternatives. MIT's current data shows the comparison between what exists today and what would exist under the alternatives, which we don't think presents really a clear picture, because we think the appropriate comparison is what existed before RNEV to show how things would be different under these three alternatives. We think that would be helpful. So the letter that we have proposed asks for that once again, presents a slide that Massport and Massport provided to us, and we provided to MIT for the flight tracks from October 2009. And again, we're asking MIT to do that comparison using that slide. And then we also reference in the letter the fact that the goal of the MOU was to explore relief for the 4R RNEV that neighborhoods in Milton are suffering under, and that the MIT study group in Block 2 has recognized 3 alternative RMP paths, which are quote unquote technically feasible, and also an RNF path, 15-degree RNF path, which is also technically feasible. And so we're asking Massport, and we're asking the MIT group did not recommend changing the status quo and using those alternative flight paths. And the reasons they stated were the community support was quote unquote unclear, and there was some additional work that would need to be done by stakeholders such as airlines and air traffic controllers, training and such. But they did say it was, in their view, these flight paths were technically feasible. So what we've done in this letter is to point out the fact that we have now technically feasible alternatives, and that those should be pursued in order to provide relief for those suffering under the 4R RNAV, which was the goal of the MOU in the first place. And so we're asking for that. We also enclose a written draft of what I had prepared for the meeting to say orally, and also a draft of Congressman Lynch's letter that he provided on the 23rd, which was a repeat, really, of what he had replied. It's a reiteration of what he had provided back in June when the draft report for these recommendations came out. So that's the letter that we're presenting for discussion and approval.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Mr. Dory, if you'd like to add anything, certainly feel free to weigh in, or if any of our members have questions or comments, please feel free to weigh in.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, as well, and members. I would say that if we look back just for a moment, starting, for example, in the summer of 2019 with the requests and recommendations that were submitted then, and forever after, we have been asking MIT to compare the pre-RNAV flight path dispersions with the RNAV concentration. And over the time frame since then, one of the things we asked Massport to do is to use its own instrumentalities to provide and develop a pre-RNAV slide, a presentation that shows visually the dispersion of the flight paths in a representative time frame, and they chose October 2009. That we gave, and they took them several months to prepare that. We did that. That's some time ago. We provided that to MIT, and then since then reiterated multiple times that we would like that request that they compare the pre-RNAV population exposure to locations across the dispersed pre-RNAV areas, so that they could then compare that population exposure with the concentrated narrowed population exposure, such that when they presently look at the alternatives that are presented and they say, well, if you look at the present RNAV, which is narrowed and concentrated over Milton, and compare that to an alternative, if the alternative were to go over parts of Quincy, that would impact a higher population level, to which we say yes. But if you were to look at the pre-RNAV population level and compare that with this present RNAV or any of those alternatives, which is what we would like to see, we believe that what you will see is actually a favorable population comparison by virtue of adding, yes, supplementally one or more RNAV paths so that there are multiple and serial or alternative paths across a population that is actually lower at any given time than the population pre-RNAV. That's what we want. It hasn't happened. We're going to reiterate that again. And Congressman Lynch was wonderful twice now in June and in September in specifically calling out the concentration and referencing the difficulty of Milton. So we're grateful for that. So that's where we are. We hope that that will help a better understanding and perhaps some better resolution than the present do nothing recommendation from MIT.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Do any of the members have any comments on the letter or any questions? And if not, we have a deadline to submit this of Monday. We'd like to try to get it in today. It needs to be submitted by email. And Sue Bridges is going to be available to help us with getting anything filed today. We have another item for the Forbes House that we'll get to that also has a deadline today. Ms. Collins.
I just wanted to say thank you. I think that the letter was, the thanks are of course extremely appropriate, but I thought it was well done and it documents, I think what the work that's been going on the past, well, more than year by Mr. Doherty and yourself, Madam Chair, and Mr. Zulus. So thank you.
Well, yes, and thank you, Mr. Doherty and Mr. Zulus for putting this letter together for us. If we have no other comments or questions, then we could take a motion to act on the letter. I think everyone's muted. Mr. Doyle, I'm sorry. I saw somebody come off mute.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be pleased to move the adoption and transmittal of the letter.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Zulus?
Just the only thing, Madam Chair, is we may want to post it up to the web. In addition to sending it, we may want to post it to the website as well.
Yes, and actually, I'd like to see if we could get the board's authorization to use the electronic signatures since we're under a timeline to get this in. If we can attach the electronic signatures, which I believe Sue has already done for us, that would be helpful. So if
Yes.
that's agreeable to everyone, maybe we'll make that part of the motion as a friendly amendment if Arthur accepts that.
Accepted.
Thank you. Okay, no further discussion, then all in favor of the motion, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Thank you, everyone. Item 3 is a thank you letter to Congressman Lynch to acknowledge his efforts. As Mr. Doherty just mentioned, he has submitted 2 letters to the MIT study process through the MCAC and Massport. And the idea was to thank him for his efforts. And we've included in this draft of the letter just some reminders about some of the language that was used in around the MOU and the joint statement when in the news release back 5 years ago, and what the goals of the study were, and what the plan was to try to accomplish, and what the current status is. But mainly to thank him for his ongoing efforts, and hopefully we'll continue to make some progress both in Washington and through this MIT process. Does anyone have any comments on the letter to Congressman Lynch? Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, thank you for putting this together. And I think it lays out our appreciation well. And similar to the other letter and exhibits, I think it makes sense to, if we approve this letter, to have it posted up on the website as well.
I think we could use the electronic signatures for this one as well. This one is not time sensitive, doesn't have to be in today, but I think ideally we'd like to get them out at the same time if we can. Probably easier on the staff to do that as well. So if anyone would like to make a motion to approve it, maybe we could include in the motion that we would attach our electronic signatures.
I move to approve and use electronic signatures for the thank you letter to Congressman Lynch for his comment letter to the FAA and the Massport Community Advisory Committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you to Tom Doherty for all of your efforts, Tom.
And thank you all for your support.
Okay, so we'll get these out, we'll get them filed, and we'll get them up on the website as Mr. Zulus requested. The next item on our agenda this morning is a discussion and hopefully an authorization for town council to respond to an open meeting law complaint. This is a complaint we received on the 28th of September from Cindy Christensen. Does anyone have any comments or Would anyone like to make a motion to authorize town council to respond on the board's behalf?
I
Madam
move-
Chair, I'm sorry, go ahead, Melinda, if you'd like. Okay, Madam Chair, I move to authorize town council to respond to open meeting law complaint by Dr. Cindy Christensen on September 28, 2021.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr.
Second.
Zulus. Okay, any just further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, and I'll just mention this is consistent with the town's practice to have town council respond to the open meeting law complaints.
And I'll
All in
accept the friendly amendment.
Oh, no, I wasn't offering it as a friendly amendment. I just wanted to give that as background. Arthur,
Okay,
that was all.
thank you. All right,
Thank you. Okay, all in favor of the motion, Mr. Doyle,
yes,
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes,
and myself, yes. Item 5 is a discussion and hopefully approval of a letter to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This would be in support of the Forbes House Museum's grant application. I think as the board members know, the Forbes House Museum is engaged in some work that they want to do on the barn and the carriage house, but this specific grant application would be a relatively small grant for just several $1,000s. It would be for hiring a photographer and preparing some brochures about the barn and the carriage house, which in talking, I followed up with the Forbes Museum and they put me in touch with someone who's helping them with the grant. It's interesting to learn that the barn and the carriage house are rare examples of remaining barns and carriages. I think she told me that this barn is one of only 2 remaining that Peabody and Stearns designed and built, and the carriage house is the only one left that was designed by Isaiah Rogers. So these buildings have some historic value, and the grant writer who's assisting the Forbes House Museum felt that this is an important project to help spread the word about the Forbes Museum and particularly these outside structures on the property. She did say that a lot of historic properties have maybe one building intact, but they don't have all the outlying buildings. And the Forbes House does have several buildings on the property that all have some historic value. So Forbes has asked us to support their request. We have supported them in the past when they've applied for grants at Mass Historic. This one is for a national grant. And we have a draft of a letter that the Forbes House provided to us. This is another one that if we wanted to submit this, the deadline is today, and we should use the electronic signatures just to facilitate getting this in. I was told that electronic signatures would be acceptable. So any comments,
Chair,
or
I'll
would
move-
anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Zulus,
I'll make a motion to approve and sign with electronic signatures the letter to National Trust for Historic Preservation in support of the Forbes House Museum's grant application.
second.
any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
yes,
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes,
and myself, yes. Thank you. And thank you to Sue Bridges, who's going to help us get this filed. Lastly, we have meeting minutes on our agenda. We have 3 dates of meeting minutes. Susie Stewart, who has left the office, prepared these minutes, and we've made some tweaks to them. Does anyone have any comments or questions, or has everyone had an opportunity to review them?
yes.
Oh. Okay, would anyone like to make a motion then? Should we act on these this morning?
Madam Chair, I'll move to
Everyone's-
approve the meeting minutes of August 25, September 8, and September 22. Sorry, Mike.
No, please. Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. All in favor, Mr. Doyle,
Yes,
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, thank you to Susie for all of her work for the board and for putting all these minutes together. We have no other business on the agenda, so we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor of the motion to adjourn, Mr. Doyle,
yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
yes,
and myself, yes. All right, thank you, everyone. Hope everyone enjoys the weekend.
yes.
And
Thank
Thanks,
Sue,
everyone.
Sue, I'll get in touch with you offline for getting these letters signed and electronically and out.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you to Milton
everybody.
Access.
Good to see
Bye-bye.
you. Yes.
Bye-bye.
We're adjourned.